Hi everybody, welcome back to Calvi Homestead. Today we are going to be playing around with the freeze dryer. So let's just jump right into it. Come on. All right, so to start off, I need to make an actual broth to freeze dry. So this is actually, I bought this from a local farmer. It's about a 5.5 pound pasture raised chicken. I'm gonna cook this in the Instapot whole, and then I'm gonna pull this chicken out, and then I'm gonna pull the meat off of it, and I'm gonna throw all of the bones back into the same broth. And then I do have a few things in my freezer that I can throw in, like chicken wing tips, and a few other things. I will season this up with salt, garlic, onion, but that's pretty much it. I leave it pretty basic when I'm going to freeze dry it, and it's so easy just to go and grab. Yeah, I have a Ziploc baggie full of these like wing tips that I've cut off that I can throw in here after I've pulled the chicken. So I'm gonna get this started. It's still mostly frozen, so I'm probably gonna let this go, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or so in the Instapot, and then I'll pull it out, let it cool just till I can handle it, pull the chicken, and then throw all the scraps back in. So I'm gonna get this started, and this is the first step to freeze drying bone broth or chicken broth. Now, if I was doing more than one chicken, I would do this in like a roaster pan. But since it's just one chicken, I'm doing it in the Instapot. Just space-wise, I also tend to push the limit with the max fill line. So you probably shouldn't do that. That should be good there. I'm not going to season anything right now in this. I'm just going to let it go like this. Just water and chicken. I will season it on the second time around. And this is the pulled chicken. I pulled most of the dark meat, and I left the chicken breasts whole. Yeah, and then these are like the chicken tenderloins here. I'm gonna use those whole pieces for like chicken salad. And then as you can see, I added onions, garlic, lots of salt, pepper. I added those bones back. I add the skin back. I think I still need to add those chicken wing tips back in there. All right, so when this finished the other night, I just went ahead and let it come down to room temperature and stuck it in the fridge to deal with it at a later time. Plus, when you let it sit and cool down into the broth, or your bits and bones, when you let them cool down into the broth, you get more flavor and you get more of that collagen extracted. And you can see there's not a ton of fat, which I'm super happy with. I'm just gonna leave that in there. But as you can see, look at that. That is some good, thick bone broth. Let's see if we can watch. That's what you want, that jiggle. That jiggle is what you want when you're making bone broth. So I'm gonna heat this back up so I can strain it. And once I strain it, I'm gonna put it in a maybe some like half-gallon mason jars or something like that, and then we'll get to the freeze drying process. So gotta heat it up so it turns back to liquid so I can strain it, and then we'll get to freeze drying. So here I'm just grabbing some herbs because, oh look, a little ladybug. I'm not going to have enough to fill the freeze dryer with just my bone broth. So I wanted to throw something in there too. I know the bone broth is going to take way longer than the herbs to freeze dry, but they still come out just fine. So here I'm picking, or that first herb I was picking was oregano.
And this second herb I'm picking is spearmint, and spearmint is one of my favorite herbs for tea. It is so good. It's my favorite tea herb.
All right, so I just kind of play around with this number. So I'm doing 6 hours extra dry time and 6 hours extra freeze time. And I'm gonna get this cooling down because it wants you to wait 15 minutes, and I need to actually wash off my trays because they're kind of dusty. So I'm gonna do that real quick.
So since the herbs and bone broth weren't both gonna fill up the freeze dryer, I decided to do apples too. And this was my first time doing apples in the freeze dryer, and oh my goodness, they are so good. Like, I will be doing a full freeze dryer load of apples. They were that good. So I'm gonna go wash my herbs here and then lay those out. And then, so it was really, really hot this day, and my bone broth, you can see it sitting there off to the side, but it started to liquefy a little bit. That's how hot it was. So when I pour it onto the trays, it doesn't look as jello-y as it was before, but that's just because it was so hot outside. It still looks really good. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but I over season any broth or bone broth that I am freeze drying. And I do that because we're condensing it basically. And I feel like I can stretch this more. So instead of freeze drying this and getting a dry product that makes a half a gallon, which is what I had here, I can stretch it a little bit and make a half a gallon plus a pint or a quart, because it's extra seasoned, extra flavorful. Now I could put it back together or mix it back together to its full strength and still get all of the benefits. So if I needed that, then I would mix it back together and get the full benefits. But if I just wanted or needed like a chicken broth, I could actually dilute that a little bit and stretch it. But here I am just sticking everything in the freeze dryer, and the hardest part of using the freeze dryer is waiting for everything to be done. Isn't this amazing how this looks? Look at that. It is crazy. It almost, I know this is like probably the worst descriptive word, but it's almost like a styrofoam, like a really fragile styrofoam. It's crazy. And these apples, I thought they were going to be like really powdery, just by the feel of them. I'm tasting one here. But they're not. They're so good. And herbs in the freeze dryer are so much better than dehydrated herbs, because, for instance, I made a pasta dish last night and I added freeze-dried basil and oregano into the tomato sauce. I make tomato sauce kind of on the go. I just use a crushed or strained tomato, add the seasonings or whatever, and make the tomato sauce. But I added those freeze-dried herbs to it, and it was like I had added fresh herbs into the pasta sauce because they rehydrated and were like fresh again. So I feel like dehydrated herbs don't rehydrate as well as freeze-dried do. So I really love the herbs in the freeze dryer. Probably one of my favorite things, and they freeze dry super quick. So any herb I have been freeze drying pretty much. I have also been freeze drying my calendula flowers to use later. So we'll see what we can do with those, which I'm excited to use. So here you can see I'm packing down the bone broth, and we'll powder this down later. And then I'm just getting the herbs and everything put into jars. I don't think I had all the jars with me, so I ended up putting some stuff in Ziploc bags just to transfer it back to the house. But here soon we are actually moving the freeze dryer out of the shop and down to my parents' basement because they don't really use the basement. Okay, so we are back with our freeze-dried goods, and don't mind the mom hair / summer hair because I have pretty long hair, and in the summer this is how you're gonna see me because my hair is just too thick and it's too hot for all of that. So you saw me package up the bone broth, and you're like, why would you even freeze dry that? That's not saving any room. I haven't powdered this down yet, so let's go ahead and powder it up so you can see really what kind of space it takes up. Not only that, even if it did take up this much space still, it's still shelf stable. It smells so good. So I'm not putting in any more moisture absorbers or oxygen absorbers because I'm probably going to use this up pretty quick. So I'm not that worried about it, but it is just a half gallon of bone broth. But I also want to powder it up so I kind of know the conversion rate, how we're going to use it, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and get this powdered up and see how much room it's going to take up. So while we're kind of doing this, it doesn't have to be bone broth that you freeze dry. It can be just regular chicken stock, beef stock, pork stock, any kind of stock, venison stock. It doesn't have to be a bone broth. It can be a vegetable stock if you want. And I just love having this on hand. It's like your own homemade bullion powder, which if you look at the ingredients in those store-bought bouillons compared to the ingredients we put in our own, huge difference. Alright, so this was our last little bit of it. And as you can see, I could have actually powdered this up a little bit more, but I don't like to heat it up too much because that can cause a little bit of moisture from the heat. But as you can see, this made about 2.5 cups of the bouillon. Now, you will be using more than you would like the store-bought bouillon. I always just kind of make this by taste. So I'm going to turn my water on and get it a little bit warm, and I'm going to show you how this dissolves into that warm water. Okay, so I'm just kind of see if I can show you kind of the consistency it is. It's actually really pretty, like crystally kind of. So I'm gonna get a spoonful of this. And then we're gonna add it. And you can see it's already starting to dissolve in there. There you have bone broth. I'm actually gonna try it. It's actually really good. Super surprised. That's really good. So, how do I use this? I'll throw this in soups. I'll throw this in rice when I'm cooking rice because instead of just water and salt, this makes cooked rice so good. Also putting it in pilaf, so rice pilaf, stuff like that. I just throw it, sometimes I throw seasoned potatoes with it. That's really good. There's so many ways you can do it. Any way you would use, there's flies in here. Any way you would use like a bouillon powder,
you can use this. So whenever I make my bone broth itself, I don't over season it, but I make sure and season it really well just to make sure that it comes out really well seasoned. And it's really good. So I set those aside. You also saw that we made freeze-dried apples, and I would show you those right now, and I would taste test those with you right now, but they are gone. My son, he's watching me. My son's watching me. He ate them along with my husband. Come over here. I'll let him tell you. Were the apples, freeze-dried apples, good?
Yeah.
What'd they taste like?
Candy. A little bit like candy.
A little bit like candy?
It had some apple taste. Well, a lot of apple taste and some not apple taste.
So,
I don't know how to describe it.
Did you like them?
Yeah, a little.
You loved them?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
A lot more.
Yeah, I know. So I need to freeze dry some more apples. So my son also loves hot tea. So do I. I also love iced tea. So I love growing spearmint for tea. So this is the spearmint, and we're gonna take a whiff of it because after it sits in the jar, even just for a few minutes, it smells so good. This smells so good. You want to take a whiff? Smells good. All right, I'll bring you back in a little bit. Bye-bye. I'm gonna bring you down here because I want to show you something else too. Okay, so I have you down here because I have some, I freeze-dried some oregano, and I want to show you some oregano I bought from Azure Standard, which is still absolutely delicious, and it smells like pizza, like a pizza restaurant. But let's show you this. So there's that. And then I want to show you the oregano that I freeze-dried, which smells like a pizza restaurant. So I don't know if you can kind of tell the color difference. I should have ground it up, but just the color difference. How much greener the freeze-dried is than the dehydrated. They both smell really good. I've only used this one fresh yet, so I'm excited. I'll probably put it in the coffee grinder, grind it up kind of like this size and use it. But I kind of like seeing it so much greener. It makes you think fresher, in my opinion. So that was my little fun freeze dryer experiment to show you guys. Unfortunately, I don't have the apples here to show with you guys, but I've been loving freeze drying, and I'm excited to show you some more freeze drying projects. So until next time, bye guys.